It was just another ordinary Tuesday evening at the Sunoco station on Route 47 in Cedar Falls, Pennsylvania. Marcus Thompson had stopped to fill up his beat-up Honda Civic before heading home from his construction job. The gas station was nearly empty. Just the usual hum of fluorescent lights and the distant sound of traffic on the highway. Marcus inserted his card, selected regular unleaded, and began pumping gas, his mind already on dinner and maybe catching the game later. He had no idea that in the next few minutes his entire understanding of honor, sacrifice, and the weight of a single moment would change forever. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Marcus Thompson wiped the sweat from his forehead with the back of his flannel shirt sleeve. The October evening was still warm, unusual for Pennsylvania this time of year, and the smell of asphalt and gasoline hung heavy in the air. He'd been working overtime at the Riverside construction site for 3 weeks straight, and his body ached in places he'd forgotten could hurt. At 34, he wasn't as young as he used to be, but the extra money would help cover his daughter Emma's braces and maybe fix that leak in the kitchen ceiling that had been driving his wife Sarah crazy for months. The gas pump clicked rhythmically as fuel flowed into his tank. Marcus glanced at the digital display, $23.47, and climbed. He pulled out his phone and scrolled through a few text messages from Sarah, asking if he'd pick up milk on the way home. He was about to type a response when he heard car doors slamming behind him. A black SUV had pulled up to the pump directly across from his. Marcus looked up briefly, noting it was one of those expensive models, a Cadillac Escalade with tinted windows and chrome details that caught the overhead lights. Not the kind of vehicle you typically saw at this particular gas station, which mostly served locals and truckers passing through on the interstate. 3 men stepped out of the vehicle, and Marcus immediately noticed something different about them. They moved with a precision that was unmistakable. Back straight, eyes alert, every gesture deliberate and controlled. Even in civilian clothes, there was something about their bearing that spoke of military training. The driver was a tall African-American man in his 40s, wearing a crisp white button-down shirt and dark jeans. The passenger was Hispanic, shorter but solidly built, with graying temples and laugh lines around his eyes. The third man, who had emerged from the back seat, was younger, maybe late 20s, with a kind of buzz cut that suggested recent military service. Marcus didn't think much of it initially. Cedar Falls was about 40 miles from Fort Braxton, and it wasn't uncommon to see service members or veterans passing through the area. He went back to his phone, typing a quick "sure, whole or 2% to Sarah when he heard footsteps approaching. "Excuse me, sir," quote. Marcus looked up to see the older Hispanic man standing a respectful distance away. Up close, Marcus could see a small pin on the man's shirt collar, an American flag with what looked like military insignia beneath it. "Yes?" Marcus replied, pulling the gas nozzle from his tank as it finished filling. "Are you Marcus Thompson?" The question caught Marcus off guard. He didn't recognize any of these men, and the formal way the man had asked his name made him slightly nervous. "Depends who's asking," he said, his construction worker instincts kicking in. "You learn to be cautious when strangers knew your name." The man reached into his back pocket and pulled out a worn leather wallet. From it, he extracted a small, faded photograph. "I'm Sergeant Major Rodriguez, retired Marines." "This is Staff Sergeant Williams," he gestured to the tall man by the SUV, "and Corporal Johnson." He nodded toward the younger man who was now standing at attention by the passenger door. Rodriguez held out the photograph. "Is this you, sir?" Marcus took the photo, squinting at it under the harsh gas station lights. It was old, the colors slightly faded and the edges worn from handling. In the image, he saw himself, but 20 years younger. He was wearing his army dress uniform, standing next to a hospital bed. In the bed was a young Marine, heavily bandaged, with medical equipment surrounding him. Marcus remembered the moment clearly. It was at Walter Reed Medical Center in 2004. His throat tightened as the memory came flooding back. He'd been on leave, visiting wounded soldiers as part of a volunteer program his unit had organized. The Marine in the photo, Marcus couldn't remember his name now, had been badly injured in Fallujah. He'd lost both legs and suffered severe burns over 30% of his body. Marcus had spent hours talking with him, playing cards, just being there when the kid's family couldn't make the long trip from Oregon. "Where did you get this?" Marcus asked quietly. his voice barely audible over the highway traffic. "That Marine you're standing next to," Rodriguez said, his voice thick with emotion, "was my nephew, Danny Rodriguez. Lance Corporal Danny Rodriguez." Marcus felt something shift in his chest. The young Marine's face came back to him now. Scared, angry, lost. He'd been just 19 years old, talking about how he'd never walk again, never surf again, never be the same. Marcus had listened, had told him stories about his own deployment, had tried to convince the kid that his life wasn't over. "Danny," Marcus whispered, looking at the photo again. "I remember now. How is he?" Rodriguez's eyes filled with tears, but his voice remained steady. "He died, sir, 3 years ago. Cancer, related to his injuries. But before he passed, he told us about you. About how you visited him every day for 2 weeks. How you never missed a day, even when you were supposed to be on leave. How you convinced him to keep fighting." Marcus shook his head slowly. "I didn't do anything special. I just sat with him." "No, sir," Staff Sergeant Williams spoke up, stepping forward. "You did more than that. Danny went home and lived 18 more years, because of what you told him in that hospital room. He got prosthetics, learned to walk again. He went to college, became a teacher. He got married, had 2 kids." The younger Marine, Johnson, had moved closer now, and Marcus could see he was struggling to maintain his composure. "Mr. Thompson, Danny was my brother-in-law. He married my sister in 2010. Those kids Williams mentioned? They're my niece and nephew. Sarah, she's 8 now, and Michael just turned 6. Marcus felt the world tilting slightly. The gas pump handle slipped from his fingers, hanging loosely from the side of his car. "Your sister?" "Danny never stopped talking about you," Johnson continued. "He kept that picture in his wallet for 20 years. He told us the story so many times we all felt like we knew you. About how you told him that losing his legs didn't mean losing his purpose. How you shared stories about soldiers you'd known who'd overcome worse injuries. How you made him believe he could still have a family, still make a difference." Rodriguez reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "This is a letter Danny wrote before he died. He made us promise to find you and give it to you. It took us 2 years, but we tracked you down through military records and social media." Marcus took the letter with trembling hands, but Rodriguez gently placed his hand over it. "Before you read that, sir, there's something else you need to know. Danny didn't just survive, he thrived. After he became a teacher, he started a program for disabled veterans in his school district. He helped dozens of wounded warriors find their way back into civilian life. He coached wheelchair basketball. He raised money for prosthetic research. The man who felt worthless in that hospital bed went on to change hundreds of lives." The gas station seemed to fade away around Marcus. Cars continued to pull in and out. People pumped gas and went about their evening routines. But he felt completely removed from it all. In his hands was a letter from a young Marine he'd almost forgotten about. A kid whose pain had moved him to extend his leave and spend 2 weeks in a hospital when he could have been anywhere else. Williams stepped closer, his voice soft but clear. "Sir, what you did for Danny, that wasn't just kindness, that was heroism, real heroism. The kind that doesn't get medals or recognition, but changes everything." Marcus stared at the sealed envelope in his hands, Danny's name written in careful block letters across the front. The 3 Marines stood in respectful silence, giving him space to process what he'd just learned. The evening air felt cooler now, or maybe it was the shock running through his system. He'd gone from thinking about grocery lists and television shows to holding a letter from a dead soldier he'd known for 2 weeks 20 years ago. "When did he write this?" Marcus asked, his voice hoarse. "About 6 months before he passed," Rodriguez answered. "He was getting his affairs in order. The doctors had told him the cancer was spreading, and he wanted to make sure certain things were taken care of." Marcus nodded slowly, then carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of notebook paper, the kind kids use in elementary school, with Danny's handwriting covering both sides. The writing was shaky in places, the effects of chemotherapy, Marcus realized, but every word was legible. "Dear Marcus, I don't know if you'll ever read this, but my Uncle Rico promised he'd find you someday. I've been thinking about what to say for months now, and I keep coming back to the same thing. Thank you. You probably don't remember me very well. I was just another messed up Marine in a hospital bed, feeling sorry for himself and ready to give up. But you saw something in me that I couldn't see in myself. When you told me about Sergeant Peterson, who lost both arms and went on to become a chef, or Lieutenant Martinez, who lost his sight and became a counselor, I thought you were just trying to make me feel better. I was wrong. Marcus paused in his reading, remembering those stories. He'd shared them because they were true, because he'd known those men personally, and because he'd hoped they might give Danny some perspective. He hadn't known if his words had made any difference. The day before you left, you sat with me when I was having a breakdown, remember? The doctors had just told me about all the surgeries I'd need, and I was crying like a baby. You didn't try to tell me everything would be okay, and you didn't give me some speech about being strong. You just sat there and let me cry, and then you said something I've never forgotten. Marcus felt his chest tighten. He did remember that day. Danny had been devastated after learning about the extensive reconstructive surgeries ahead of him, the long rehabilitation process, the uncertainty about what his life would look like. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. You told me that courage isn't about not being scared, it's about being scared and showing up anyway. You said that every day I chose to keep going, even when it felt impossible, was an act of bravery. You made me understand that my value as a person wasn't tied to what my body could do. I want you to know what happened after you left. At first, I didn't think your words had sunk in. I was still angry, still scared. But slowly, day by day, I started to remember what you'd said. When the physical therapy got too painful, I'd think about Sergeant Peterson learning to cook with prosthetic arms. When I felt like I'd never be whole again, I'd remember Lieutenant Martinez finding purpose in helping other people. It took 2 years, but I learned to walk again. Real walking, not just getting from point A to point B, but actually enjoying the act of moving through the world. I went back to school using the GI Bill and became a teacher. I specialized in working with kids who had learning disabilities and physical challenges, because I understood what it felt like to have your body or mind work differently than everyone else's. Marcus wiped his eyes with his sleeve, not caring that the 3 Marines could see him crying. The letter continued for another page, detailing Danny's marriage to Johnson's sister, the birth of his children, his work with disabled veterans, and the hundreds of lives he'd touched through his teaching and advocacy. The funny thing is, I don't think you realized what you were doing. You weren't trying to be a hero or save anyone. You were just being decent to another human being who was hurting. But that decency changed everything. Not just for me, but for everyone I was able to help afterward. My daughter Sarah asked me once why I keep your picture in my wallet. I told her about how sometimes one person can change the entire direction of another person's life, just by showing up and caring. I told her that kindness is the most powerful force in the world, even when, especially when, nobody is watching. I'm dying now, Marcus. Cancer is winning. But I'm not afraid, because I know my life mattered. I know I made a difference. And that all started with you sitting beside my hospital bed and treating me like I was worth something, even when I couldn't see it myself. My family is going to find you and tell you this story because I need you to understand something. Every good thing that came from my life after Walter Reed, every person I helped, every moment of joy I experienced, it all traces back to those 2 weeks when you chose compassion over convenience. You changed my world, Marcus, and through me you changed hundreds of other worlds too. I hope knowing that brings you some peace. Semper Fi. Danny Rodriguez. Marcus folded the letter carefully, his hands shaking. When he looked up, he saw that Rodriguez had moved closer, along with Williams and Johnson. Their faces were solemn but filled with something Marcus couldn't quite identify at first. Then he realized what it was: reverence. Mr. Thompson, Rodriguez said quietly, there's more you need to know about Danny's impact. After he started his veterans program, it got picked up by other school districts. Today, there are 47 schools across 12 states running versions of Danny's program. Over 800 disabled veterans have found meaningful work through these initiatives. Williams stepped forward. Danny also started a scholarship fund for children of wounded warriors. It's provided college education for 63 kids so far. The fund raises about $200,000 a year. Johnson's voice was thick with emotion as he added, "My sister named their daughter Sarah after you told Danny that story about your own daughter. She wanted to honor the connection between you and her husband. Little Sarah is in 3rd grade now, and she already talks about wanting to help people the way her daddy did." Marcus felt overwhelmed by the scope of what he was hearing. A simple act of human decency, extended during 2 weeks of leave time, had created ripples that were still spreading decades later. He thought about all the times he'd wondered if his life made any real difference, all the moments he'd felt like just another middle-aged construction worker going through the motions. "I don't understand," he said finally. "Why tell me all this now? Danny's been gone for 3 years. Rodriguez exchanged glances with his companions before answering. "Because Danny made us promise to do more than just deliver his letter. He wanted us to make sure you understood the full scope of your impact. But more than that, he wanted us to ask you something." The older Marine reached into his jacket again and pulled out a thick manila envelope. "This contains documentation about every person Danny helped, every life that was changed because of the work he started. Names, stories, photographs. Danny spent months putting it together with his wife's help." Williams took over the explanation. "Danny's program is still running, but it needs leadership. Someone who understands the mission, who has the credibility to speak to wounded veterans. The school board has been looking for the right person to take over as director." Johnson stepped closer, his young face earnest. "Mr. Thompson, Danny specifically requested that we offer you the position. It comes with a full salary, benefits, and the chance to directly continue the work you started in that hospital room." Marcus stared at them, speechless. The gas station around them had grown busier as the evening rush began. But the 4 men stood in their own bubble of conversation, isolated from the ordinary world by the weight of the moment. "You want me to quit my job and run Danny's program?" "We want you to understand that your work isn't finished," Rodriguez said simply. "Danny was just the beginning. There are hundreds more veterans out there who need what you gave him. Hope, dignity, the belief that their lives still have purpose." The manila envelope felt heavy in Marcus's hands as he looked at these 3 Marines who had tracked him down to deliver a message from beyond the grave. In that envelope were the stories of lives changed, futures rebuilt, hope restored, all because he'd chosen to spend his leave time sitting with a wounded kid instead of going home early. But even as the magnitude of the offer sank in, Marcus felt the weight of his current responsibilities. Sarah was counting on his construction job for stability. Emma needed those braces. The mortgage wouldn't pay itself. Could he really walk away from everything familiar to chase the ghost of a decision he'd made 20 years ago? Marcus looked at the manila envelope, then back at the 3 Marines standing before him. The weight of their request hung in the air between them, heavy with possibility and uncertainty. Around them, the gas station continued its evening rhythm. Cars pulling in, engines starting, the mundane symphony of ordinary life continuing while his world shifted on its axis. "I need to think about this," Marcus said finally. "I have responsibilities. A family. I can't just—" "We understand," Rodriguez interrupted gently. "Danny knew you'd need time. That's why he included this." The older Marine reached into the manila envelope and pulled out a smaller sealed packet. "Financial projections, salary information, relocation assistance if needed. The position pays $68,000 a year, plus full medical and dental for your family. There's also a housing allowance, since the main office is in Virginia Beach." Marcus felt his eyebrows rise. The salary was nearly double what he made in construction, and the benefits were better than anything he'd ever had access to. But it wasn't about the money. It was about uprooting his entire life based on a connection to someone he'd known for 2 weeks 2 decades ago. "Virginia Beach is 8 hours from here," he said. "My daughter's in high school. My wife has a job she loves. I can't ask them to give up everything they know." Johnson stepped forward, his young face earnest. "Mr. Thompson, my sister wanted me to tell you something. When Danny was dying, he talked a lot about regret. Not regret about his injuries or his illness, but regret about opportunities he'd missed early in his life. Times when he played it safe instead of taking chances that could have helped more people." Williams nodded. "Danny specifically said he hoped you wouldn't let fear of change keep you from a chance to multiply your impact. He said comfort zones are where good intentions go to die." Marcus felt a flash of irritation. These men didn't know his life, didn't understand the complexity of his situation. It was easy for a dying Marine to philosophize about taking risks when he had nothing left to lose. "It's not about fear," he said sharply. "It's about being responsible. I have a mortgage, car payments, and a teenager who's already dealing with enough changes in her life." Rodriguez held up his hand. "You're right. We don't know your situation, and we're not here to pressure you. But there's something else Danny wanted you to consider." He pulled out a photograph from the envelope, A group shot of about 30 people in graduation caps and gowns, all wearing military dress uniforms underneath their academic robes. These are the first graduating class from Danny's vocational rehabilitation program. Every one of them is a disabled veteran who found new purpose through the skills training and job placement services the program provides. Look at their faces, Marcus. Marcus studied the photograph. The graduates ranged in age from early 20s to late 50s. Some were in wheelchairs. Others had visible prosthetics. A few showed the subtle signs of traumatic brain injury. But without exception, their expressions radiated pride, hope, and determination. It was the same look Danny had developed during those final days at Walter Reed, the look of someone who'd rediscovered their worth. The woman in the front row, Maria Santos, Williams pointed to a Hispanic woman in her 30s wearing a purple cap and gown. She lost both arms in Afghanistan. Danny's program helped her learn to use advanced prosthetics, and she's now a graphic designer earning $45,000 a year. She supports her 3 kids as a single mother. Johnson indicated a man in the back row. That's Thomas Wright. He was homeless for 6 years after losing his leg and developing PTSD. Danny's program didn't just give him job training. It connected him with mental health services and transitional housing. He's been clean and sober for 4 years now and works as a peer counselor at the VA. Marcus examined each face in the photograph, seeing echoes of Danny's journey in every graduate. These weren't statistics or abstract success stories. They were real people who'd found their way back from the edge because someone had believed in them enough to create a pathway forward. How many people go through the program each year? He asked quietly. Right now, about 60 annually, Rodriguez replied. But with proper leadership and expanded funding, we could easily handle twice that number. There are thousands of disabled veterans who could benefit from these services, Marcus. Thousands of people who are sitting in their own version of that hospital bed, wondering if their lives still matter. Marcus thought about his construction crew, guys he'd worked alongside for years. Half of them were veterans themselves, many dealing with physical limitations or invisible wounds from their service. He'd seen how hard it was for them to find purpose in civilian life, how many struggled with the transition from military structure to the uncertainty of the outside world. What exactly would I be doing, day to day, I mean? Williams pulled out a detailed job description. Program oversight, veteran intake and assessment, coordination with VA medical centers, fundraising, community outreach. But the most important part would be what Danny called bearing witness, being present for veterans at their lowest moments, the same way you were present for him. Quote, the phrase hit Marcus harder than he expected. Bearing witness. It wasn't about having all the answers or performing miraculous interventions. It was about showing up, seeing people's pain without flinching, and helping them believe in possibilities they couldn't yet see for themselves. His phone buzzed with a text from Sarah, getting worried. Is everything okay? He realized he'd been at the gas station for nearly an hour. His normal 15-minute stop had stretched into something that might reshape his entire future. I need to call my wife, Marcus said. Can you give me a few minutes? The 3 Marines nodded and stepped back, giving him privacy. Marcus walked toward his car, Danny's letter still clutched in his hand, his mind racing. How do you tell your spouse that strangers at a gas station have offered you a chance to honor a dead Marine by changing careers? He dialed Sarah's number, and she answered on the first ring. Marcus, what's going on? You've been gone forever. Sarah, something incredible just happened. I need to tell you a story about a Marine I met 20 years ago. For the next 10 minutes, Marcus explained everything. Danny's injuries, their time at Walter Reed, the letter, the program, the job offer. Sarah listened without interrupting, asking only a few clarifying questions. When he finished, there was a long silence. 68,000, she said finally. Plus benefits, full medical and dental. Another pause. Marcus, I've watched you come home from construction sites for 15 years. You're good at your job, but you've never loved it. When you talk about your Army days, especially the time you spent with wounded soldiers, your whole face changes. You light up. Marcus felt his throat tighten. But Emma's school, your job, our whole life here. Emma's resilient. Virginia Beach has good schools. And Marcus? Sarah's voice grew soft. I've always known you were meant for something bigger than construction. Maybe this is it. Maybe this is why you went through everything you did. So you be ready for this moment. When Marcus returned to the three Marines, his decision was written on his face before he said a word. Rodriguez smiled, the first genuinely relaxed expression Marcus had seen from him all evening. "Danny would be proud," the older Marine said simply. As they exchanged contact information and discussed next steps, Marcus felt something shifting inside him. The weight of routine that had pressed down on him for years was lifting, replaced by something he hadn't felt in decades, a sense of calling. Williams handed him a final envelope. "One more thing. Danny wanted you to have this on the day you accepted the position." Inside was another photograph. Danny at his wedding, standing with his bride, both of them beaming. On the back, in Danny's handwriting, "Thank you for teaching me that broken things can still be beautiful. Now go show others." As the three Marines prepared to leave, Johnson turned back one final time. "Mr. Thompson, there's something Danny's daughter wanted me to tell you if you said yes. She's 8 years old, but she's been practicing a speech for when she gets to meet you. She wants to thank you for giving her daddy the chance to be her hero." The black SUV pulled away into the evening traffic, leaving Marcus alone at the gas station where his ordinary Tuesday had transformed into something extraordinary. He looked at Danny's letter one more time, then carefully folded it and put it in his wallet, right next to a photo of his own daughter. Tomorrow he will give his notice at the construction company. Next month his family would begin a new chapter in Virginia Beach. And somewhere in the ripple effects of a choice he'd made 20 years ago in a hospital room, hundreds of wounded veterans would find their way back to hope. Because one man had learned that showing up for others is the most profound form of heroism. The gas pump had long since stopped running, but Marcus didn't start his car immediately. He sat in the driver's seat, processing the magnitude of what had just occurred. 20 years ago, he'd extended his leave to sit with a wounded Marine. Tonight, that choice had circled back to offer him a chance to extend that same compassion to hundreds more. As he finally drove home to tell Emma about their upcoming adventure, Marcus realized that Danny had been right about one thing. Courage isn't about not being scared. It's about being scared and showing up anyway. And sometimes, if you're lucky, showing up changes everything. The drive home felt different than usual. The familiar streets of Cedar Falls seemed to hold new meaning, as if he was seeing them for the last time with his old eyes. Marcus passed the elementary school where Emma had learned to read, the park where they'd spent countless Saturday mornings when she was younger, the diner where he and Sarah had their first date 18 years ago. Soon, all of this would become memory, replaced by the unfamiliar landscape of Virginia Beach, and a mission he was only beginning to understand. When he pulled into his driveway, Sarah was waiting on the front porch, her silhouette backlit by the warm glow of their living room windows. She'd changed out of her work clothes into the old Penn State sweatshirt she wore when she was nervous or thinking deeply. Seeing her there, Marcus felt a surge of gratitude for the woman who'd listened to his incredible story over the phone and immediately understood its significance. "So," she called out as he walked up the front steps, "are we moving to Virginia?" Marcus held up the manila envelope and Danny's letter. "We're moving to Virginia." Sarah wrapped her arms around him, and for a moment they stood together in the October evening, holding each other in the weight of the decision they'd just made. Through the window, Marcus could see Emma at the kitchen table, bent over homework, completely unaware that her world was about to change. "How do we tell her?" Marcus asked. "Carefully," Sarah replied, "but honestly, Emma's stronger than we give her credit for. She'll understand." They found Emma working on algebra, her textbooks spread across the table alongside a half-eaten sandwich and her laptop. At 16, she'd inherited Marcus's practical nature and Sarah's emotional intelligence, creating a young woman who approached life's challenges with both logic and compassion. "Hey, kiddo," Marcus said, settling into the chair across from her. "We need to talk about something important." Emma looked up, immediately sensing the gravity in her father's tone. "Did someone die?" "No, but—" Marcus paused, realizing the complexity of explaining that someone had died, but 3 years ago, and that death was now offering them a new life. "It's complicated. Let me tell you about a Marine I knew a long time ago." For the next hour, Marcus recounted the evening's events to his daughter. He watched her expression change from confusion to amazement to excitement as the story unfolded. When he finished, Emma sat quietly for several minutes, processing everything she'd heard. "Dad," she said finally, "do you remember when I was little and I asked you what heroes look like? You told me they look like regular people doing extraordinary things when nobody was watching. Marcus nodded, remembering the conversation. Emma had been maybe 8 years old, fascinated by superhero movies, but struggling to understand why real heroes didn't wear capes. You were Danny's hero, she continued. And now you get to be a hero for other people like him. How is this even a question? Sarah laughed, reaching over to squeeze Emma's hand. What about leaving your friends? Your school? Everything you know here? Emma shrugged with the adaptability that Marcus had always admired in teenagers. Friends can visit. I can make new ones. But Dad gets to save people for a living now. That's pretty cool. The simplicity of her perspective cut through all of Marcus's remaining doubts. Here was his 16-year-old daughter, facing the disruption of her entire social world, and her primary concern was supporting his opportunity to help others. Over the following weeks, the Thompsons began the process of reshaping their lives around Marcus's new calling. He gave his notice at Riverside Construction, enduring good-natured ribbing from his crew about going soft and becoming a desk jockey. But when he explained the real reason for his career change, sharing Danny's story with his coworkers, the joking stopped. Several of his fellow veterans on the crew asked for information about the program, mentioning friends or family members who might benefit from its services. Sarah requested a transfer within her company's Virginia division, leveraging 15 years of exemplary performance to secure a position in their Norfolk office. Emma threw herself into researching Virginia Beach high schools, ultimately choosing one with a strong marine biology program that aligned with her growing interest in environmental science. The most difficult part was selling the house they'd called home for 12 years. Every room held memories. Emma's first steps in the living room, the kitchen where they'd celebrated countless birthdays, the backyard where Marcus had taught his daughter to throw a baseball. But as potential buyers toured their home, Marcus found himself focusing not on what they were leaving behind, but on what they were moving toward. Rodriguez called weekly with updates on the program's current operations and the transition plans for Marcus's arrival. The existing staff was eager to meet Danny's chosen successor, and several veterans currently in the program had specifically requested to share their stories with the man who'd inspired their mentor. There's something else, Rodriguez mentioned during one of their conversations. Danny's widow, Angela, wants to meet you before you officially start. She lives about 20 minutes from the main office, and she's been instrumental in keeping the program running since Danny's death. The prospect of meeting Danny's wife both excited and terrified Marcus. What do you say to the woman whose husband's life you'd helped save, whose children exist because of a choice you made in a hospital room decades ago? 3 weeks before the move, Marcus received an unexpected visitor at the construction site. A young man in his early 30s, wearing the casual clothes of a college student, approached him during lunch break. Mr. Thompson, my name is David Chen. I graduated from Danny Rodriguez's program 2 years ago. Marcus set down his sandwich, immediately giving the young man his full attention. You came all the way from Virginia Beach? David shook his head. I live in Pittsburgh now, about 2 hours from here. When I heard through the veteran network that you were taking over the program, I had to meet you. I wanted to thank you personally. Over the next 30 minutes, David shared his story. He'd lost his right arm and suffered severe hearing damage in an IED explosion in Syria. After his discharge, he'd struggled with depression and substance abuse, unable to find work or purpose in civilian life. Danny's program had not only provided him with vocational training in computer programming, but had connected him with mental health services and a community of veterans who understood his struggles. I'm a software developer now, David explained, showing Marcus photos on his phone of his apartment, his girlfriend, and his 1-year-old son. I make good money, I'm clean and sober, and I'm happy. None of that would have happened without Danny's program. And Danny always said the program existed because of what you taught him about the value of every person. As David prepared to leave, he handed Marcus a business card. I run a small tech consulting company now. When you get settled in Virginia Beach, call me. I want to donate some pro bono work to help modernize the program's computer systems. It's the least I can do. Quote, the encounter with David crystallized something for Marcus. This wasn't just about honoring Danny's memory or accepting a better job. This was about stepping into a role within a living, breathing network of transformation that stretched far beyond anything he'd imagined. Moving day arrived in early December, marked by an unusually warm Virginia Beach morning that felt like a good omen. The Thompsons' new house was a modest 3-bedroom ranch, just 15 minutes from both Marcus's office and Emma's new school. As they unpacked boxes and began arranging furniture, Marcus felt the strange sensation of his old life and new purpose blending together. That evening, after Emma had claimed her new bedroom and Sarah had organized the kitchen, Marcus sat alone on their unfamiliar back porch, looking at stars that seemed different from the ones visible in Pennsylvania. Tomorrow he would report to his first day at the Danny Rodriguez Veterans Rehabilitation Center, where he would begin the work of bearing witness to wounded warriors seeking their own path back to wholeness. His phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Mr. Thompson, this is Angela Rodriguez, Danny's wife. Welcome to Virginia Beach. Could we meet for coffee tomorrow after your first day? I have some things of Danny's that he wanted you to have." Marcus typed back his agreement, then sat in the December darkness thinking about the mysterious chain of events that had brought him to this moment. In 12 hours, he would walk into a building dedicated to a Marine he'd known for 2 weeks, surrounded by staff and clients whose lives had been shaped by ripples from a choice he'd made, without thinking it would matter beyond those hospital walls. The weight of responsibility felt different now than it had at the gas station, less overwhelming, more energizing. Tomorrow, he would begin learning the individual stories of 60 veterans currently enrolled in the program, each carrying their own version of Danny's original pain and hope. Tomorrow, he would start becoming the person Danny had always believed he could be. As Marcus finally headed inside to join his family in their new home, he realized that Danny's final gift hadn't been the job offer or the financial security. It had been the revelation that Marcus's life had always mattered more than he'd known, and that the most important work he would ever do was just beginning. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.